Ready Nurse Fam, Andrew here. So today I wanted to talk to you guys about what the timeline looks like when you're pursuing CRNA school from the time you graduate nursing school all the way up until you're applying and hopefully interviewing for a slot at a CRNA school program. If you've ever wondered, how long that takes, what it looks like, where you should be at in your journey and what things you should be doing, that's what this video is going to touch on. I know those were all things that I was concerned about when I started to pursue CRNA school as a new grad nurse, and when I started there weren't a lot of resources available telling you what to do, how to do it, and how long that would realistically take, what you should expect from the process. So even though there are more resources kind of starting to come out of the cracks on the process of pursuing CRNA school, I want to touch on my journey and give you a little bit of insight as to the things I've done personally to prepare myself for CRNA school and to give myself the best chance when submitting applications to the programs I'm interested in. So let's get started. One of the most important things that we need to get out of the way initially here with this discussion is, what do CRNA schools typically require when you're applying to their programs? First of all, they require that you have a BSN degree. They also typically require your GPA to be above a 3.5 overall, as well as specifically within your science courses. You'll also need to have 1 to 2 years of critical care experience. Obviously, around the 2-year mark is more desired, but there are people that do apply with 1 year of experience and they get in. So as far as after the critical care experience or during, you need to look into getting your CCRN certification, and that CCRN stands for Critical Care Registered Nursing Certification. You can also pursue other certifications like CEMC, CSC. Those are cardiac medicine certification, cardiac surgery certifications. Those kind of beef up your application, show that you've taken initiative to go above and beyond and getting those extra certifications to prove your knowledge level. Some schools also require that you take the GRE. Be sure that you double check this before submitting your application. I know with recent issues, the pandemic, a lot of schools are waiving the GRE requirement, but just double check with the program first so that way you get it in advance, and if you have to retake it, you have time to do so. You don't want to have to take it last minute, have all that extra pressure, wondering if you're going to make an adequate score. Typically, CRNA programs desire a 300 or higher to be competitive. They want you to be above that 50th percentile, which typically sits around 150 for the verbal, 150 for the quantitative section, and then around a 4 for the analytical writing section. They also will require you to have your ACLS, BLS, PALS when you're applying to the program, but some schools will let you just have that in place before you're officially matriculated into their program. Also, another major component of your CRNA school application lies with shadowing a CRNA officially. This can occur while you're in school, while you're in your critical care experience, while you're waiting for your interview, but shadowing a CRNA definitely gives you the most perspective of what this profession has to offer and whether it is for you. So those are some of the most major requirements that schools will typically require. Some of them may be voluntary, but largely what I've seen from assessing these schools, just in choosing where I want to apply, those have been the main requirements that I have seen commonly throughout the country. So now I'll give you a little bit of insight into my own personal journey. So I graduated from my BSM program in May of 2019, but actually my journey even started before that. So as soon as my last semester began, I started applying to, researching, and searching for different ICU positions within my city. I knew I wanted to find a new grad residency program. I wanted something that was going to transition me from nursing student to new grad nurse to seasoned nurse. So that was really important to me and to my learning process and giving me a good foundation of nursing skills. So I actually applied for and interviewed for a position about February, and I actually accepted that position in March of 2019. So fast forward, I graduated in May of 2019. There was a little bit of a delay with getting our attestation for the NCLEX exam, so I didn't actually get a chance to test for my NCLEX until like mid-June. So I took the first available date. I didn't want to wait. I didn't want any of that information I had just retained from nursing school to kind of slip out of my mind and let myself get a little anxious. So I took that as soon as I could. And I passed with 75 questions, which was the bare minimum at that point in time. I think it's a little different now given the circumstances, but I passed that in early mid-June, and started my orientation and new grad nurse residency program in mid to late June of 2019. My orientation phase itself lasted about 3 months and ended at about September-ish of 2019. And this is in a MICU setting, so a medical ICU. It's kind of like a generalized ICU setting. We kind of get a mix of everything, from cardiac patients, renal patients, respiratory patients, surgical patients. I loved that gave me a variety of different patients to learn from and to kind of grow from and choose what I was more passionate about. So the nurse residency program itself was to run for about a full year. Now, given that the pandemic started early 2020, that kind of got cut short. It actually didn't end up happening for the last 4 months or so of the program. It kind of just tapered off, and there wasn't a residency program anymore. So with as many times as we changed leadership, it wasn't the experience I wanted. So make sure you do your research and find a new grad residency program that is tried and true, thoroughly established, has great leadership, and isn't planning on changing leadership. That's super important. We changed hands of our residency leadership probably 4 times during the course of that program, and it was very frustrating and very hard to continue through that residency program. But fast forward, September came. I'm starting to be on my own. For those first 4 to 6 months, it was a steep learning curve. You're not having a preceptor anymore to kind of oversee you, double check your work. You have to really be on top of your game at all times in an ICU setting because things can change at the drop of a hat. And you have to be able to pick up on those subtle cues to be able to intervene and benefit your patient. That's what you're there for. So I ended up taking my CCRN just after about a year of experience towards the end of July of 2020. I had studied for off and on about 2 months, and more seriously for a solid month prior to that. So all of July, I took time every single day that I was off and studied for that exam. The CCRN was actually much easier than I thought it would be. I'm not going to say that it's easy, but if you do prepare for it and you're continuously preparing for it throughout your nursing experience in the ICU, then it shouldn't be that steep of a learning curve for the exam. Now, in contrast, I studied for about 3 months for my CEMC exam. So I took August, September, October, and a little bit of November to study. I needed a little bit of a break from my CCRN exam too, so I wasn't as thoroughly preparing initially for the CMC exam, but those last 2 months or so, I really drilled it. A lot of my experience in the MICU setting was not largely with cardiac patients. I had experience with like titrating vasoactive drips, taking care of patients that were post PCI, myocardial infarction patients, hypertensive crisis. I even got a chance at my level 3 to take care of an Impella patient, which they rarely come by our unit there. So that was a great opportunity. But I knew there were many things I was lacking on the cardiac medicine certification side of information. So I had to thoroughly prepare. If you're coming from like a CVICU setting, you probably don't need as much time to prepare. But coming from a smaller, lower level trauma center, MICU type setting, I definitely didn't feel like I had enough experiences to bolster up the level of knowledge I needed for the CMC exam. So I took a lot of time to study and prepare for that exam. I actually ended up passing that exam mid-November, and then at the same time, because I'm crazy, I decided to transfer. Like I said earlier, I wasn't really getting a diversified experience in my ICU, and that was important to me. I wanted opportunities to learn and grow and continue to take care of different types of patients so that I could better care for any patient that came through the ICU. That was important to me. So I had a friend who works in a CVICU at our sister hospital, same organization, and they had an opening for a position. So we kind of coordinated a lateral transfer from one ICU to the CVICU, and all of that happened literally right after my CMC exam. So I passed that exam and then started in the CVICU the very next week. I think it was even the very next shift I had scheduled. So that was kind of a whirlwind of events that happened for me. During the first week and a half, 2 weeks that I was at the CVICU position, I submitted my first application to CRNA school. So that was a huge feat. That was kind of a culmination of everything I had been working towards, and it felt amazing to take that first step towards the next step of my life. But I made a very very silly mistake, and I overlooked the fact that this school required the GRE. I had read through the requirements multiple times. I had read that if you had a certain GPA, the GRE was waived for you. And in all of the times I reviewed the requirements, I never caught that it was for students with a graduate GPA. So be very cautious of that. And I ended up emailing the admissions counselor for that program, and I said, is this true? Am I understanding this correctly? I think I overlooked this previously, and I don't have my GRE. I haven't taken that. And I got a reply back saying, yes, that's true. You got to take your GRE. We're not waiving it. And if you don't have a graduate GPA, you're SOL unless you take this. So long story short, I had to schedule it for the very next test date that was available. I decided to opt for the in-person exam because I knew if I was at home on my computer, there were plenty of distractions that could detract from my overall score. And not having enough time to prepare and kind of not even knowing where I stood on their score range, knowing I needed a 300 and that people thought that was hard to get, I needed all the focus I could have. So I ended up scheduling it for December 5th. The application was due December 1st. So I was already a little late on that, but they told me, if you take it this day like you said you would, and you sign up for the automatic transfer of scores to our university, send me the unofficial score report when you get it personally, then we will still consider you. So I ended up taking it December 5th with about 2.5 weeks of preparation, which is insane. That exam is nothing you're passionate about when you're pursuing nursing school. It's, like algebra, geometry, some basic algebra you do use in your everyday life, but not to the point where you're factoring out exponents and radicals, and it was just overwhelming how much I had forgotten since taking calculus. And there was a steep learning curve. I had to study. And then the verbal section, good Lord, there's a lot of strategy there that you need to hone in on. So I ended up using Magoosh to prepare for that. I watched their videos whenever I listened to their videos every time I was commuting to and from work. It was kind of like my routine before and after a shift. It kind of got my mind off of nursing for a minute. When I came home, I would do a few practice problems, and it usually put me right to sleep. So if you're having trouble sleeping and you need to prepare for the GRE, but I took an initial practice GRE exam full length. The ETS website offers two. That gave me some insight as to where my baseline was, and then I took one about 1 week into my study time. That told me I didn't even improve at all. It was the exact same score. And then I took one right before, and you know what? Actually, I didn't have time. So I didn't take one before my actual exam. I just kind of studied my little heart out and prayed for the best. And then, exam day came. I took that exam, did better than I thought I would. And here we are. So I've officially submitted that application. I notified the school, hey, I took this exam. Here were my unofficial scores that were reported on the screen at the end of my exam. I'm still waiting for the report to come up, but I will send them to you as soon as I get them. Please still consider me. I'm working really hard on this. I'm determined. So that's kind of been my whole timeline for CRNA school since graduation from nursing school. It is not an easy, immediate process. You have to be determined, driven, and kind of get those steps in sequence. I'm not saying you can't go out of sequence, but it seems that at least with nursing, each certification kind of builds on itself. And in fact, you can't get the CEMC or the CSC exam without first having your CCRN. And honestly, I'm going to be using all those resources to help me prepare for my CRNA school interview, because they're going to drill you with clinical questions, kind of like what you see on those exams. So now here we are. I've submitted one application. I plan on submitting a couple of others. And now that I have, my certifications out of the way, I have the GRE out of the way, I can kind of relax and approach prepping for my interview with full intensity. I did a little bit of a review course for interview prep, and while I did okay, there were still plenty of areas for improvement that I was able to pick up on and that I got feedback on. So that's where I'm at right now. I definitely plan on uploading more videos to tell you guys how the process is going for me, where I'm at, if I get an offer for an interview, what their interview process is kind of like, and if I actually get an acceptance offer. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, if you are interested in more videos like this, make sure you like this video, let me know. That way I know what kind of content to keep giving on this channel, and then also subscribe so that way you get a notification every time I upload a video and update you on where things are at and what changes I'm making. Right now, let me know in the comments below where you're at in your journey, what you still need to do, and maybe we can help each other out along the way. Let's get you to where you want to go. Let's keep checking off those check marks on your list of things to do for your goals. All right, until next time, Study Nurse signing out.